Yes, and we are live. Welcome everyone to our very first Bytecode webinar. As you might remember, we are going to talk about common pitfalls for software-based startups and also how to avoid them. My name is Broekarts and I will be your host for this afternoon. It's my great pleasure to announce the main speaker. Here is Luciano Nooijen.
Thanks, Nick, for the amazing introduction. Let me switch to the correct view. Yeah. So, like Nick said, today we will be talking about the common pitfalls for software startups and how to avoid them. Of course, why should you listen to me? Why am I speaking here? Who am I, really? I'm Luciano Nooijen. I'm co-founder of Bytecode, a software engineer. I love doing software research as well. I specialize in software development for software-based startups. And contrary to most webinars, I'm not the salesperson for Bytecode here, and I will not spend 10 minutes to discuss how great Bytecode is and whatever. Just to keep it short, we are an experienced strategic partner who can support your software-based startup by validating your idea. So I am, like I said, Luciano Nooijen. I have worked with a lot of startups, both on the payroll. I co-founded some of them. Some I came in later. Some of them were through Bytecode, of course, because we are focusing on startups. So I have seen a lot of things go well, and I've seen a lot of them go not so well. And that's why I'd like to share my knowledge, my experience with you, to hope that you can avoid some of these pitfalls, and so you just can learn from my experience, of course. So it's not just my experience as well. We also have a few special guests. We have Airship and Daily. Those are two clients of Bytecode. For Daily, we actually wrote the first line of code, and for Airship, we took over the technical side when their app was already in production. We are also joined by a few startup incubators, like you can see here, Novelty, Utrecht Inc., ACE, and Yes Delft. And they will supply additional material, additional videos to just get a bit more in depth. It's not just me who's talking here. Like you saw on the previous slide, all opinions are my own. So I might say some things that Bytecode doesn't agree with, just so you know, it's my opinion, not Bytecode's per se. At the end of the presentation, after we have discussed the pitfalls, before we do the big Q&A, we will watch a video of Airship and Daily speaking about their top 3 pitfalls to avoid, because it is just great. They are startups who are a bit further in their journey than they are not starters anymore. They are already in production, and there's a lot to learn from them. So that's really something to look forward to. Today, we will first take a look at at a few factors of success. I have made a bit of an explanation on what success means. What do you need for it? And the whole presentation today, everything in total, will take around 1 hour, excluding the Q&A. But after we discuss the factors of success, we will go into the pitfalls. We will go through the pitfalls related to the idea, the finances, the implementation. We have a short in-between Q&A as well. So if you have any questions related to terminology I use, or if something isn't that clear, feel free to drop it in the chat, or drop it in the chat. If you're watching on webinar.bytecode.nl/live, there is a button to go to the YouTube page, and there you can leave questions in the chat. So I will answer some in-between questions during the webinar, and then afterwards I can answer any question you like. So with that out of the way, I'd say let's get started. And like I said, we are joined today by Pieter by Pieter, who is Daily's co-founder, and Daniel, who is Airship's co-founder. And we will get into their startups later, but first let's meet them as a person. Who are they?
And that was a great experience, but still I was feeling that I was missing something. and I kept on searching for what this was, and I always really enjoyed like connecting people, bringing organization and people together, and supporting people. And then I thought, okay, I need to do something with that, because people always came to me for advice and tips, and so I went for a training to become a coach, a life coach. And in the same time, I started to work as a freelancer, freelance business development. And that felt already much better, because it also gave me time to reflect on what happened to me when I was younger, and I lost my father when I was 18. And that had, of course, a very big impact on my life. And I also wanted to do something with that. And actually, it was really funny that what you see is when you decide to really walk your own path and follow your heart, that you come across new opportunities that match where you want to go to. And that's when I came in contact with Quirin. She also lost her father. So together we actually founded Dearly, because from the experience that we had, that we felt there was a societal issue. We wanted to solve that issue, and that's why we founded Dearly.
Just over 10 years ago, I started my first company, which was basically a group of friends who like to make music and have a party with friends. And these two things combined really didn't let us to any stage yet when we were just shy of 20 years old. So we started to do parties ourselves to provide a stage for these music plans that we had. And all along the way, the hobby became a business. And it was, I think, around 2017 when I started to see screens flowing into the crowds of festivals. And to take my mind off stuff, I started thinking about a technological approach to an improvement of the festival experience, based on this mobile trend that I saw.
Yeah, so I hope you got to know Pieter and Daniel just a bit and see where they are coming from, what their background is. So let's get a bit of context. What are the factors of success? All startups have something in common. They want to be successful. They want to succeed. What success means is different for every startup, maybe for every person. For some, it might be, money. For others, it might be reaching a goal, changing something in society, improving the world, or a combination of those factors. You have an idea and you would like to, you have this vision and you want to see it become reality. Maybe you have a product idea that will revolutionize the market, or maybe you have a thought of a digital tool that will automate something in people's lives and make their work, their lives, their whatever a lot easier. So whatever that might be, you need success to realize your vision. So what are the factors really? Well, you can see it as a sort of trinity. It's a trinity because they are three separate factors, but yet they are so connected that they influence each other a very great deal. It's hard to really pull them apart, but they are still separate. So that's why you can consider it a trinity. It's the idea and it's the finances, and those two together are required for the implementation. That's the best way you can see it. And we'll discuss these in order quickly. So first up is the idea. What will you build? For whom? Why are you building it? It's very important to think about making sure your idea is concrete enough. A strategy for traction and your product market fit, your user experience is part of this as well. Do market research to find out what potential users want and need. Also, don't try to start and build the real thing soon. That's one of the pitfalls. That's the first pitfall we will discuss in depth in a bit. And try things out and rely on the experts. That's part of the idea phase as well. So let's see what the idea for Dearly and for Airchip were. For Airchip, it was to completely change the way you order drinks at the festival, to digitize that market. So instead of shouting at a barman, "I'd like 2 beers," you just on the app, instead of waiting in the queue for half an hour, just order it on your app and pick it up when it's ready. That was Airchip. Dearly, completely different story. Their mission was to create a platform for grief and to bring grieving people together. But of course, Daniel and Pieter will explain it much better than I will. So let's take a look.
Well, sooner or later we all come to the moment that we lose somebody. But in society, it's not an acknowledged and supported team. It's not very common for people to take a lot of time when they're losing someone, and people around you, they don't know how to talk about it. So we decided to build a company that's raising awareness for this topic, and actually provide people with support in their grieving process. So for me, it's about really tackling the issue that it's kind of like a taboo around loss and grief, and we want to normalize grief and loss, or loss and grief in our society. So providing people with support, but also making sure that within companies, within businesses, there's a kind of support level. Within the educational system, there's support, and within the society itself, that there's that is normal for people to talk about such subjects, because we all have to deal with it sooner or later.
And what is the solution that really delivers for these issues that you mentioned?
Yeah, so we built an application that actually is focused on 3 areas. The first area is really connecting people who lost a loved one. We call it the buddy system. And the second part is providing people with information about what is grief, like news articles, articles in general, but also poetry, can be anything, any type of content. And the third part is more about connecting with professionals. So there's also professionals associated to the platform that can provide professional support when you need it.
As a startup, you imagine the problem to be there, and sometimes you can envision a problem that's not so much structured in real life as it is in your head. But I encountered this problem oftentimes while I was getting to be a more experienced event producer. This is the fact that any party is great unless people have to wait without a reason. And this can be for toilets, for the entrance, but obviously also in front of the bar. The only real impact on an event experience was the fact that people got stuck in logistic problems. So the problem was very obvious from the get-go, and the solution to it was very vague still. And this is basically in where we were in 2019, early 2019, when we were trying to get the first funding in.
And could you describe, in a few sentences, what was the solution that you brought?
So create the best experience for visitors is our primary mission target. And we do this by basically automating a lot of behavior using tech that was up until now very not technical. So to make it very concrete, we automate your verbal ordering to someone working behind the bar, and we automate the payments completely. Freeing up time to be more efficient from the professional side, but especially from the visitor side, you don't ever have the sense of waiting in line, because the waiting happens in the cloud.
Yeah, so great to hear Pieter and Daniel explain the sort of itch they felt and how they started working on it. So that's the idea part of the Trinity. The second part is the finances. And I mean, it makes sense. You need money to get started and to grow. And you need profit to have a sustainable business. And that's why this is a very important aspect. And this includes, investments, whether you get venture capitalists involved, or if you get a loan, or all that sort of idea. That's part of it. But also part of it is your business model. You need a solid business model. But the thing is, if we're talking about the VC side of things, so really the finance itself, not per se the business model and how you are earning revenue, but the step before it, your plan. You should spend as little time on this as possible, because all of the time you will spend on finance, managing finances, or talking with investors, that's wasted money. You cannot spend that time on your product and getting traction. So we will get into this pitfall later, but it's important to realize that finances are part of it, and it's very important. It's crucial that it's there, but the time spent should be as little as possible. And the third part is implementation, and this depends on your idea and your finances. You need the idea. You need that sort of the first thing that starts the fire going. You need to see, I want this changed. And you need the finances to support making this reality. And making reality, that's implementation. And here you can also think about how big is your team. It's also your intellectual property that you are building. It's what exact product are you really building? It's scaling and allowing for pivots. It's keeping high development speeds and preventing technical debt. And we should also, part of this in the implementation phase, you have two big parts of your business where you need to focus on. You need the product and the traction. And usually you have the traction side of sales, marketing, etc. That's one side of the business, and then there's a product development, and those need to be in balance. So a good rule of thumb for startups is spend half of your time on the product and half of your time on your traction. And this is something to keep in mind as well, because if you look at the founders who have a background in sales, they tend to focus too much on the traction. But founders with a background in development, they focus too much on the product. So this is something to keep in mind as well. Ask yourself how this balance is for your startup. So now we will get to the sort of core of this presentation. Understanding what are the three big aspects, we are now going into the pitfalls. So there are only a few for the idea and for the finances, and most are for implementation because that's sort of my expertise. The startups I was involved with were in the implementation phase mostly. So the pitfalls related to idea. This might seem a bit obvious to say, knowing that you need to know what to build before you start to build. But if you think of situations like you are building your product, your production product, so the real thing that people will buy with only your gut feeling, that only your gut feeling is telling you that clients want it and not the clients themselves, or if you cannot in detail explain the exact problem your users are facing or what the solution should be in detail, or if you went straight into development of the product without a wireframe or a proof of concept. That is falling into this pitfall because you will waste a lot of time and money on this. Editing your app might cost a week for a simple change, but if you have a design mockup, it might only take a few hours. So, of course, there's always the very slim chance you will hit the nail right on the head on your first try. But let's be honest, it's very unlikely and it's very risky to do it straight away. So maybe your target audience doesn't think your software will solve their problem. So how can you fix this? You need to work in this order. Of course, you need your idea, but from your idea, make a UX design. Validate it with users. Then build a hacky proof of concept, something you know from the get-go, we're gonna throw this away. But just to see it in action, duct tape it together. That's your proof of concept. And only then, when it's validated, when you know how it should work, only then build your actual product. You need to validate the problem, your idea and your solution. Don't assume, but know. So talk with your audience a lot and get experts involved. Pieter from Daily, he also told us about reflecting on validation before building. So let's take a look.
There are a lot of lessons to be learned from running a startup. I mean, if I look at my learning curve over the past 2 years, it's insane. But what I would have done differently, firstly, I think I would have invested more time in market research and really like testing and pivoting and really making sure that the business case that we are building, that there's also really good validation of it. So that's one thing, like, because we are, of course, we experience loss ourselves. We had this idea of how the solution should look like. And of course, we supported that with research. But when reflecting on that, I think I would have done, I would have tried to, to talk in lean startup terms. I would have built the bicycle and then take it from there instead of trying to build the rocket ship at once. And I think we were kind of like, in the beginning, okay, shit, yeah, we need to have a solution application that has all these elements.
Yeah.
And if I reflect on that right now, I would have started with one of those elements and really work that one out, make sure that that's exactly what the customer needs, instead of trying to work on your gut feeling.
Yeah, it's difficult to not be biased by that.
Yeah.
So that was Pieter on testing and validation. And let's go to the second pitfall, which is very much related to this. Rome was not built in a day. And that's the same with your startup. You cannot just, like Pieter said, you cannot just build a rocket ship from the start. That's impossible. So what should you do? How should you approach this? You should always start as small as possible. The smallest workable product you can validate with users. That's your MVP. Everyone knows the lean startup and MVP, but you know how to go from there. So after your MVP, which is really the bare minimum workable product, then that's not something you can really sell. It's just, does it work? And from there, you should work towards a product that you can market and sell, and that's your MMP, your minimum marketable product. And if you have that, then of course you should incrementally improve and expand your product based on feedback, experience, market needs, the market changes, and you need that sort of future goal, the dot on the horizon, so to say. That's where you use a roadmap for. You need to know where you are going. You should refer to this roadmap when you are deciding what feature to build next. And you should also get clients involved in building this roadmap. So how do you make this? You can, of course, make a very long list in some sort of Jira or a software, but there's a better way to do this. So you can make 4 categories based on the cost of a feature and based on the value of the feature. And this is how you should categorize things. You should think of, this is my ideal picture. This is how my product in the most ideal situation with infinite time and budget would look like. Then divide that into your features or epics or however you like to call it. And then you can categorize these features on how much will it cost and how much value would it bring. And this is a quadrant from Clean Agile by Robert C. Martin. Great book, highly recommend. And this is how you can categorize them. So do now, of course, you want to focus on what has the lowest cost and the highest value, and you never want to do anything that doesn't have any value but high costs. So planning your work is essential. So Rance from Novelty also told us that this was one of the most common pitfalls he had seen. And Daniel from Agile also has some things to say. So let's have a...
When you're starting out, most people try to solve too many problems at once. Therefore, we always advise to specify. Try to solve one really specific problem first and then scale up. It's easy to see the big mountain, but it's really difficult to climb it in one go, so pick a niche. However, especially as a tech startup, this can be difficult. Sometimes you solved one problem really successfully, but then you create a scenario where that one customer wants you to solve more of his problems. This could be an easy way to generate and create more revenue, but in practice, you've turned your scalable startup into a service provider. You've earned money too fast. One strategy to overcome this is to build modular blocks from the start. Easier said than done, but create separate functionalities that can be turned off and on again. Most applications need a user portal, an admin control, a payment system, and a dashboard, and it can be helpful to plan for those at the start. Create a functionality roadmap and let your customers decide what's in it and when it should be working. Think about it.
One of your colleagues, he explains it really easily. In the beginning, go slow to go very quickly in the end. Well, obviously, in the beginning, we did quite the opposite. There was an amazing feature list that, well, obviously wasn't feasible to finish in a certain amount of time. So being very strict towards yourself, like what feature actually does make me money in the short run.
Yeah.
Focus on that and skip the rest.
And also adds value to the customer, of course.
Yeah, well, I think that's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, first validate that people love to use it, and then the clients want to pay for it. Often I think it could be done with like 30% of the features that you envision as a founder. So be very strict to yourself and have your product owner tell you again and again what is necessary and what's not. I learned that personally, to listen to those arguments more and more.
Yeah, I hope this video really showed how important it is to have a roadmap and to do this part. So let's get to the pitfalls related to finance. Then the first one is a pretty huge one and impactful. If you have issues like the chance of going bankrupt if your next round of funding does not come through, or if you spend lots of your valuable time as a founder on finances, if you spend more time with your investors than with your clients or your team, then you've probably walked into this pitfall, spending too much time with venture capitalists, being too reliant on them, and neglecting other responsibilities. Your business model should not depend on venture capital or future venture capital coming in. In the ideal case, of course. But this pitfall is a problem because it is much more important to spend time on your product and your traction. And there's also another aspect to this, that is, if you spend your time as a founder, I mean, of course, everyone loves doing finance and bookkeeping, right? It's a waste of time as a founder. Get a good accountant who takes care of those parts of finances. Just spend your time as well as you can, and the things that you can, get an accountant for, let them take care of it. Then if we come back to the venture capital, then I would highly recommend only accepting venture capital from people who are actually invested in the idea, not just people who are there for the monetary gain, because those people are gonna, they want you to either succeed really quickly to make a successful exit or fail quickly. It's not a good way. If you want to build a sustainable business, then you shouldn't accept VC from people who are only there for the money, because that's going to be a lot of headache and you spend a lot of time pleasing them. So we will now watch a video of Pieter on his business model. He doesn't talk about venture capital per se, but he talks about the business model that you need to be a sustainable business and to stand on your own legs. And that is, of course, very important as well. So let's have a look.
And thirdly, I think it's very essential to focus on the sustainability of your company. So we focused a lot on the I always call it the soft side of our company, which is logically because we experience loss ourselves, that our key motivation is to be able to support people and change something, but that doesn't make your company sustainable. Mm-hmm. What you need to be able to be a sustainable company is, well, you need income, and you need to have your business case working, and you need to focus on sales, you need to focus on revenue, you need to focus on profit. Yeah. And we focus a little bit too much on, okay, there are so many things we want to do, but the key element is helping people. And before being able to change the world, you need to have a sustainable business model. And I would have focused a little bit more on that in retrospective.
So on the topic of venture capital and business models and such, we will have Pitfall 4. If you have a situation like running out of money within a year of getting an investment, or planning to scale up your company 5 times the size within a year, or if you're spending 2K a month on company cars, or if you're spending 3K per month on your office, or in short, if you're just spending your money, or let's be honest, your investors' money very fast, then Pitfall 4 is probably something you've walked into. If you're, it's a problem because you need the money for many things, and you can only spend every penny once. And if you spend it too easily because you see, wow, there's 200K on the bank account, there's enough, it'll suddenly be gone. So how can you fix this? How can you prevent this? It might sound very simple, or just make a plan. Just how will we spend the money we have? on what will we spend it? When will we spend it? It sounds very easy, but it's still a pitfall a lot of startups walk into. So let's continue with the pitfalls related to implementation. The first one, if you have a situation like you are building software using technologies you were not really familiar with before, if you are figuring out the correct database model or software architecture along the way, if you want to use all types of new technology, the newest of the newest, if you find that the foundation of your product is unstable, that a lot of bugs get introduced, where you didn't even touch code when implementing new features, then you probably were not building on a solid foundation using the technologies you are familiar with. It's a problem because you will have to maintain and continue development for many, many years. So you need to know the ins and the outs of the software which is running your software. And if you're a senior Java developer, let's say, that doesn't mean you're a senior Golang or Haskell developer. And the quality of your product will just be lower if you work with new or unfamiliar technologies. You will have less knowledge about your own product and what it does. So development will also take longer and the quality will be lower. So wanting to use new technology is something all developers struggle with. It's a shiny thing syndrome. And I like to use new technologies myself. But you should really choose the technology you are familiar with for your startup, not the newest, shiniest thing that will be unmaintained within a year. You should make your data model beforehand and lay a good, solid technical foundation on a well thought through architecture. And if I'm talking to developers right now, use the best practices, clean architecture or hexagonal architecture, domain-driven design, dry code, solid code, all that sort of fun stuff, but don't over-engineer as well. We will come back to technical debt and over-engineering in a bit. It's always great to use a new technology in another product. And you should do that. It keeps the work fun. And there are enough situations where you can try out and use new technologies. Think of just, programming for fun, if you're learning something, if you're making a proof of concept. But don't use it as a foundation for your software startup, because using new technologies, trying them out as a foundation for your software startup, that's not the place to do it. So, to build a solid foundation, you need to start the product with experienced developers using the technologies they have used in many other projects. So that's the sixth pitfall. Starting with inexperienced developers and not thinking about your starting team. And inexperienced developers, I know this might be hard for student startups, but that usually matters a bit less because the teams will be smaller, the products will be smaller, the stakes aren't as high usually. But what does inexperienced here mean? It means people who are not experienced with starting a code base for a startup. You don't just want any developer from a big corporate starting a new project, because that corporate experience is completely different from startup experience. And that is something I have experienced with myself. If you use inexperienced developers, setting up a new project will lead to technical debt, unmaintainable architecture, and it will cause a lot of issues when scaling up. Inexperienced developers also usually have sometimes, or quite usually actually, trouble translating business needs to the correct implementation, or they take a long time, or their estimates are off, or it's just a bit of a headache. And junior developers can be a great addition to the team. Don't get me wrong on that, but not in the starting phase. They need to be mentored by seniors to be as valuable as they can. Then if we're talking about the size of your team, if you are all by yourself and doing everything yourself, that's impossible. There's too much to do. But on the other side, if you have a team of 12 people, 12 founders, that's overkill. There's not that much to do. So what should you do? You should hire at least one senior developer for your starting team, probably going to be your CTO. And then for each technical domain, So think of back-end, mobile, front-end, embedded. You want to make sure that the foundation is made by someone with lots of experience. And if we're talking about the size of your team, 2 to 5 founders seems to be the optimal range. And also make sure that the team is like a group of friends. They need to love to work together. They want to grab a beer together. That's the type of team you want. So let's listen to Daly and Edgip talking about their starting teams and how they found the right people for the startups.
And what did the founding team look like? Was it just you and Korean?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, that's the founding team. Yeah, we're both co-founders of Dearly. Yeah.
and besides the founders, were there also other people connected to the team, and with what kind of knowledge or responsibilities?
Yeah, so in the beginning we also had somebody helping us with content creation, and then of course after going through all the research and everything, we also we needed to build an application, so we went out there and we found, of course, Bytecode in supporting us with developing the application. But we also had support from a UX designer in the prototyping phase. And we also had some support in social media and marketing.
At the beginning, we had some change arounds from the founding team until the solid team that we are today. Yeah. I think this has also to do with the fact that we were interrupted by a massive global pandemic, and that people had other ideas about what they want to do in life. I once initiated the gang, and I'm still initiating it, but there were some swap rounds, and I think everyone walked away happy, and the ones who stayed are still happy here. So but it is an important thing to think about, to test the cultural due diligence with other people you work with, because it is like a marriage. I think one important lesson is also here to watch out for the right cultural match with the people you work with. And make sure that everyone is in the same visionary direction. And everyone knows getting developers is very hard. It was the same back then. Yeah. So you might be scared of the figures that you have to pay for a recruitment agency. And some of them are really techy and sticky and nasty. But we now learned that when you have the right recruitment agency, it can really, really accelerate the right cultural fit for talent as well. And we have a really great experience with people who actually understand the job of recruitment very fine. So to any new founder, please consider having support in recruitment, because just finding a right developer cultural fit is very hard to do yourself when you have no experience in the field.
So lots of great stuff in that video. Before we continue, if there are any questions related to comprehension, if I use terminology you're not familiar with, or some things are maybe not as clear, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you're watching on the webinar.bytecode.nl, you can press the button to open the chat, and there's a button to open it. So feel free to drop it, and I'll answer it in a moment. But first, let's continue. If you face issues like new team members taking months before they get used to the workflow and the way things go, or if releases are taking a few hours or maybe even a few days if you include all the manual testing, if you have your CTO, your tech lead clicking through all sorts of graphical interfaces for hours for every deployment, or if there's no clear chosen way of working, thing like Agile, Scrum, Kanban, whatever, or if you spend a lot of time on toil, so repetitive tasks that don't bring any value to the business, then you walked into the pitfall of not having appropriate processes in place and not being ready to scale up or scale up fast, and not automating tedious manual and repetitive tasks. It's a problem because it will take so much of your time to continue to do all sorts of manual work every day, every week. The development can get stuck when you cannot scale up fast, and the product will not be adapted to the market because of this. So how can you fix this? By doing it, by analyzing your workflows and trying to improve. Hold retrospectives and reflect on how things are going, and document how things are going. Document so when when new members come in, there's a document of this is how we work. That's really important. And then also on the automation part, automate it. Automate the most important, most common workflows that are now manual. So think of unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing. So you don't have to test for 2 hours before every release. So it's done automatically. Have a good and fast continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline for one-click automated deployment. So instead of waiting and then pressing all sorts of buttons, just have one button. And there it goes. If you want specific advice for your situation, by the way, feel free to email me on it. I'd love to get in touch and help you out. It's no strings attached. It's not like sales pitch or whatever. And also see what way of working makes sense for you and stick with it. So Agile, Scrum, Kanban, just pick one that makes the most sense, stick with it. And make calculations whether to stick with repetitive tasks or to automate them. So a quick example. You have a task that takes 15 minutes. You have 5 developers and they all do it daily once. It will take 1 day, 8 hours, to automate it. Automate it in a way that it takes 5 minutes. So you will save 10 minutes. If you automate it within 2 weeks, you got your time investment back. So make these pragmatic calculations and see what makes sense, what you should automate, what you shouldn't. And also talk with each other about the problems you're facing. But if you're a developer, say, well, I've got to do this every day. Aren't you annoyed by it? Don't you think we can save time on this? Have these conversations. It's great and it'll save you a lot of time and therefore money. There are other things you might neglect very easily. And this pitfall is related to things that you will only notice when it's too late. So think of situations like you are losing important and valuable data because a database table got truncated in some deployment migration script. Or you are leaking confidential information and you have to inform all of your users that their data has been compromised. Or you have unauthorized persons accessing your servers or databases because someone pushed some secret keys to a public Git repository. So that's why the pitfall here is neglecting seemingly unimportant things such as backup, cybersecurity, and handling secrets. And this is a problem because, well, I'm not going to explain why this is a problem. If you have a data leak or a massive data loss, it means the end of your startup. You're done for. So make sure that you fix this stuff. Make sure you are using managed databases that have point-in-time recovery. So when something goes wrong, you just say, I want to return to this exact point, and it's restored. Also make regular backups as well. And separate your production, staging, test, and development environments and have automated tooling checking your code base for any secrets. So GitLab security scanning is very great for this. Have a deliberate process of dealing with data. Have a password vault, not some Excel sheet in Google Drive that everyone accesses. Adopt security best practices. Change your passwords every quarter. Enforce password strength within the company. And there are, of course, some DevSecOps. If I'm talking to the developers now, secure by design ideas. Don't use passwords. Use private public key. That sort of stuff. Just make sure it's fine. It'll take maybe an hour to set it up. 1 hour versus losing your whole company because stuff got compromised. I know what I would do. So, just a quick interlude here. How do you know you have fallen prey to a pitfall? That's a big issue here. Because it's important to realize that we don't always recognize that we are struggling with some of these pitfalls ourselves. It's always easier to see someone do something wrong than it is to recognize that you're doing something wrong. We are not objective enough when it comes to our startup, and it makes sense. And you often don't notice small but important changes or the gradual changes over time. So how do you find out you've fallen prey to a pitfall? Ask feedback from external people, experts, mentors, friends. What do they see? We will talk a bit more about information from externals at the end of my presentation. Talk about pitfalls with your colleagues, just like I said before. Openly discuss pain points, look for them. Don't make sure people feel free to say, well, this is going absolute shit. That should be fine to say. That's the sort of culture you should create. Also, you should grab the data which you have available to the pitfall and analyze it. So let's say, how much money have you spent in the last month? Be critical to yourself. Did you actually need to spend the money there? And asking yourself questions is very, very important. So for any of these pitfalls, ask yourself the question, how does this apply to my startup? Can I think of an example? Ask yourself questions like, how much time do we spend on traction and how much on development? And how much time do we spend with the investors? And what are some tedious tasks I do daily that could be automated to save time? How much do we spend each month and how much comes in? And at this rate, how long before we run out of money? And when can we sustain this business without venture capital? When can we stand on our own legs? Or what is the one feature that nearly every client and prospect has asked us about, but that we don't yet have? Or what do they constantly complain of? So ask yourself as well, how fast can we develop new features compared to when we just started? Are we satisfied with the velocity that we have? So a quick interlude to see if there are any questions from the chat. If there were any things that weren't really clear. I will try to fix the delay in audio as well, which was happening. Maybe this is better. I hope this improves it. Let me know whether the sound is better now. It looks like we don't have any questions so far. Pitfall 9. Taking on too much technical debt, over-engineering and or not documenting. If you have issues like onboarding taking a long time, data inconsistencies that shouldn't be there, like your revenue is changing when you change the price of a product because you linked to the products table instead of saving the price from the time it was purchased, or if you have a lot of moving parts because you created a system that is ready for 1 million concurrent users, well, you only plan to have 10K concurrent users in 2 years, or if you have a multi-cloud 18 microservice setup in 7 different Kubernetes clusters before your MVP is even ready, then you over-engineered, had technical debt, and are not documenting. Also, making the same mistake over and over is part of this pitfall as well. So this will complicate and slow down your product development. You will make the same mistakes over and over. So plan beforehand on what you're actually going to do. And so make sure the foundation is solid, like we touched on before. And make sure you find the right balance on it needs to be good now, but it needs to be good in the future as well. But try to keep it as small as possible. That fits these 2 criteria. So don't over-engineer. That's another thing. And to avoid technical debt, like I mentioned before, make a hacky proof of concept and then build it in a way that's actually good. And if you take on technical debt, plan to pay it off, or at some point, 2 years in the future, you will be only paying interest on your technical debt and not creating any new features. Document why decisions are made. Code should be self-explanatory if you're talking about what it is doing. That's clean code. But you should document why you chose to do it this way. You should never hide your failures. Have a centralized collection and do postmortems if the shit really hit the fan. Make sure that everyone can just take a look at it and we can all learn from it, because it's okay to make mistakes, but it's unacceptable not to learn from them. And keep in mind, the only way to go fast is to go well. So another pitfall related to the technical part is not knowing the reliability of your software. So if you don't know how often your app crashes, or not knowing how many API requests fails, or if you have like maybe your services could have been down for 2 days and you didn't even know. That is not knowing the quality and reliability of your software. So how can you fix this? Bare minimum, have health checks, get notified on downtime, and log crashes. I can give some concrete examples of what software you can use. Use Sentry for if you have server-side issues or app crashes, log them to Sentry. For the server, use Prometheus and Grafana. For most programming languages and frameworks, is plug and play. That's the bare minimum you need to have. So, and then on a related but different point, collect the right data and have the right metrics. That's not only valuable for behind the scenes for development, but it can also be very valuable to use some metrics to see how well your solution is doing in practice. And Daniel from Airship has some very interesting things to say on this.
Well, we had to wait a long time for it since the start of the product development, but we have been thinking about all the metrics that we could take out of our product, right? If you would now go to an event organizer, you would ask like, what are waiting times for people to get into the to get a drink, or what's the efficiency of each bartender, right? You have no idea. You have like metadata of the whole event, but no specific behavior in the efficiency of the hospitality. But what was really great is that the efficiency figures and the waiting times, even in like the most peak moments of an event, where normally this would be like 4, 5, 6, 7 people deep, the lines, given from my experience, there were no waiting lines. There was more revenue processed per worked hour than we would ever imagine, and where we expected around one phone, we use phones as a point of sale device, one phone per 200 people. We felt that we could easily run peak pressure at around 500 visitors per phone, which is a great underscoring of what we've been modeling before.
Yeah, so very great things in this video. Let me quickly change some offsets of the audio to see if it improves a bit. Pitfall 11. If you are running everything in the cloud on the quote-unquote free credits of Google Cloud Platform, AWS, or if you're using Firebase as a backend of your application for authentication, or maybe you're already paying 1,000 euros a month because your free credits ran out. So you see where I'm going with this. Vendor logins, and Trojan horses, because these free credits are great, but they are Trojan horses. You need to watch out for it. You can use them for sure, but make sure that your business is not going to be taken hostage together with all of your data and your users. You can use them, but make sure you can easily switch vendors. So from the very expensive Google Cloud Platform and AWS, you should be able to switch very easily to DigitalOcean, Linode, all these sorts of cheaper but very great alternatives out there. So be reluctant to accept these freebies. So let's now transition to a different subject. Lacking focus and pivoting too fast. If you are building a feature for 6 months and you haven't released anything yet, or if you have a 5-year plan that you really want to stick to, or you're constantly changing your roadmap, doing a weekly pivot every Friday, or if there are people within the founding team who have different visions for the future, you are lacking focus. You cannot plan for the long term. That's very important to acknowledge. There is this concept called the fog of the future. The further you look into the future, the more unclear things become. You need some kind of vision that all of the founders share and what you are all aiming for. You need to know the objective. You need to have this fake idea of, I'm going into this direction. We want to reach this mountain peak. But how you are getting there, you're using your compass, but the exact road you need to figure out along the way. So you need to a good way to do this is to have a vision document that everyone within the company can see. You can even use it to show some of your clients, maybe a small part of them. You can that gets you some external accountability as well. So it's harder to just switch it up a bit. You should be open to other solutions and outside perspective, so you should be able to change it. So think of situations like COVID hit. If you have a 5-year plan and you planned every step you will take, and you were 1 year into your plan, and COVID hits, good luck with the rest, because that's not gonna work. You need to be able to pivot, but you shouldn't do it too often. You need to have that goal. So if you have the document I talked about before, share it with everyone within your company, some external as well, because that's a really good way to keep everyone on track in the same direction. Maxime from ACE also noticed tunnel vision for many startups in the past and touches on the value of having mentors in the video we're going to watch. Pieter and Daniel will also talk about their focus during development.
One of the, I'd say, most common pitfall is having tunnel vision, which basically comes down to the fact that it's a very good thing to be convinced of your own idea, especially as an entrepreneur. You need to be, because otherwise you're not going to get there. But there's also something like being too convinced of your own idea to the point where you're not taking any external advice. So one way how we are supporting startups that experience this is to broaden their horizon with our pool of mentors. We try to have a great variety of mentors for our startups to work with, to open their minds to potential new ideas and potential pivots for their startup idea.
When we started Dearly, we were actually like, okay, we want to focus on the young people. That's our target audience. But then the application went live, and then there were like people signing up from all kinds of different ages, different backgrounds, and this was amazing. So it became clear to us it was not just about supporting people in a certain age group, but it was more about there are so many people in the Netherlands that are actually looking for support and acknowledgement that they can be in pain because they lost someone, and that they want to be connected to someone. So I think the key element of why we're doing this is it's actually one of our biggest powers, because it became clear that there are so many people in need of this support. So the validation is really there, and I think that's amazing. I think the greatest hurdles, well, one of the biggest for sure is focus. Yeah. Because there are so many things that you can do in the startup phase, that it's also easy to lose track of what is exactly the most important thing to focus on. The second one is more, I think it's more about finding really the product market fit. I think that was really like for us, of course we've done a lot of research, like ton of research, and we also had, especially also in the business case, we had clients saying, yeah, we want to pay for your solution, but actually ending up paying for the solution, that's a completely different world. So that's definitely one of the biggest hurdles as well, that really finding what the customer wants and making sure that your product is in line with those needs.
Yeah, so a lot of great stuff in that video. Let's get started with Pitfall 13. If you don't know what you're gonna do with your startup, if you don't receive the funding you expected or not as much as you expected, or if an important team member leaves and you don't know what to do, if you are constantly following the facts instead of making proactive turns when needed, then you don't have a plan B, C, or D for when things don't go as expected. And believe me, your startup journey is not gonna go the way you want it to go. So you better be prepared for it to go just, I would say, a bit different, but it's gonna go a lot differently than you expect. And if you don't have the plans ready, then it's going to take a long time, and it'll lose you time, it'll lose you money. And if you're clinging to a plan because this is our only hope, that's not great either. So you should avoid being suddenly surprised with unplanned things. Getting hit from the blind side. That's what you should avoid. So be critical to your own plans. Don't be too optimistic. Be honest with yourself. Think of, but what if it doesn't go like we plan? So, for example, if it's clear that the investment will not come through because you're waiting already for 2 months, don't wait, just keep waiting. Well, it'll come. Just assume it's going to be a no and move on. Don't keep clinging to the thing you have. If you should have backup plans. And have the difficult conversation beforehand. Everyone is enthusiastic when founding a startup, but even then you should have the difficult conversation. But what if one of us will leave? That's the thing you should plan on beforehand. On the topic of team members, let's get to the next pitfall, and that is not taking care of individual team members. So if you have issues like team members are tired or burnt out, there's lots of overtime work, there's a very high work pressure, there are conflicts within the team, team members are not enjoying the work, maybe health issues are coming up, then you're not taking care of individual team members. You want the people in your team to love working with you. And a good team means a good product. It's the motor behind your whole startup, behind everything. And burnout is very frequent for startup employees, and it's really horrible. It will cost time and money, but it's also just for the person. I mean, it's not great for them. So try to avoid this. It's good for them as a person and for your setup as a startup as well in the long run. Don't expect 24/7 availability or for people to be 24/7 on. Make an on-call rotation. So when you have like things in the evening, plan for, okay, you will take this evening, I will take this evening. Plan it. And if you need to work overtime, that means you're a bad planner. So make good plans and be realistic on what's possible, and take care of your health as well. If you give people a gym membership or play basketball or football or soccer for the Americans during lunch, or if you have an Xbox, play some FIFA or during the break, or play some chess if you're by yourself, just to get your brain on something else. Just focus on something else. And if you're a chess player, my username is Luciano Nooijen on chess. Feel free to add me. Make sure that everyone has a good place to work. It should be good for both the quiet, deep work, the concentrated deep work, and for collaboration. And this should be the case whether you are, in an office or most likely now working from home. Also create this culture of learning, especially for developers. They want to learn. Make sure that it's possible. Take every Friday or every other Friday afternoon and do some fun projects. Do group code reviews. Get that real team feeling. And hire the people you want to be friends with. That's very important as well. And if you're giving feedback, if you're having a difficult conversation, don't try to be kind. Be accurate. It might be hurtful. Embrace a sort of tough love mentality. Be honest. And on the topic of being honest, let's get to the next pitfall. That is not recognizing the value of internal communication. So if you have conflicts within the teams or departments, if you have internal politics, not really team spirit, misunderstandings, developers not knowing what other developers are working on, then you have walked into this pitfall. It's a problem because you're not syncing up enough. Not everyone is on the same page. You have this island culture. How can you fix it? You need to establish clear communication guidelines and channels. And you need to make commitments, very important. So you don't want to say, yeah, maybe I'll try. If you give a commitment, say, yes, it's done next Monday. Or you say, no, I can't because of other commitments. If you say yes to avoid disappointment, it's lying. If you say yes, make sure you keep your word. Be honest with the team and demand integrity. So make sure everyone is on the same page, and there is this trust within team members that if someone else says to you, I'll fix it before Monday, you are absolutely certain it will be done before Monday. That's what you need to build a great team. Also have daily sharing of work tasks. So do either daily stand-up in your office or do it online on Slack every morning. Send what you're going to do. And at the end of the day, say, I did this today. Asynchronously, fine as well. And don't micromanage, of course, but that everyone knows about not micromanaging. So, Pitfall 16, sorry. You are not Steve Jobs, and not even Steve Jobs was the Steve Jobs that some people sometimes make it look like. He was not the Jesus of the tech industry. And don't consider yourself to be a Steve Jobs-like type. Don't consider yourself to be a visionary. Because your gut feeling is not a better indicator for a good product market fit. It just means you're ignorant if you follow your gut feeling over external outsiders, so users, clients, experts, mentors. And if you fall into this pitfall, you will fail. So you will build the wrong product for the wrong group of people. You will build solutions for problems that don't even exist. You will waste money on features that people will not even like or don't even want. Even when scratching your own itch, this is still the case. Listen to outsiders. Consider that you are not an expert in everything, and outsiders have a much more objective view, and they are the people who can tell you advice, give tips. You will never be made aware that you have fallen prey into the previous pitfalls if you don't listen to outsiders. Keep that in mind. And your business might not be as unique as you might think. And there's a lot to learn from those who came before you. The people who have experience is so valuable, and you can avoid so much trouble if you listen to the outsiders. So fix this by actively looking for input, appreciating all input, actively involving experts and mentors. Build an active community of fans who can give feedback, and do market research and validation. I mean, look at the pitfalls for the idea. So to prove this important point, here's a video where Stefan from Utrecht Inc. explains the value of letting go of your initial vision. Pieter and Daniel that explain us how valuable outside views have been for them.
I want to talk to you about some of the pitfalls that we see here at our startup incubator, especially around validation. So oftentimes we encounter startups or scientists that want to start a startup that come to our door with innovation, some new technical possibility, and they want to build it and launch it. And immediately what you run into is that it's unvalidated. So what we urge these aspiring startup entrepreneurs to do is to really start at the problem. So first, find the problem that you want to solve, and then find the problem owner. If you know the problem and the problem owner, and you analyze that, and you better understand what the underserved need is of the problem owner, then you're much better able to define a solution that actually works. So you have to build it once instead of building it several times because it doesn't work. So what we really urge our entrepreneurs to do is to, when they come in with a business idea, just let go of the idea, focus on the problem it solves, understand it, find the underserved need, and then go back to the initial idea and see if it still makes sense. If it does, perfect. Then go on to creating your business model, describing your team, your funding needs, building and launching that product to market.
Well, as a startup, you are constantly, the market is changing, you are evolving as an entrepreneur yourself as well. I mean, it was our first company, first startup that we launched, so there was a lot of room for growth and learning as well. So I think the flexibility, the agility was one of the key elements that we used for dealing with those challenges, but also really being, you know, as an entrepreneur, you think it's your baby and you want to grow that baby yourself, but actually asking for help is something that is really important because you don't have all the knowledge yourself. So being able to step over that feeling, okay, I have to protect my baby, but actually share it with the world, it makes it grow a lot better and more efficient. Also getting feedback from the potential users and the users, of course, was very helpful as well. Yeah.
Yeah, get outside people to test your findings on UX research, basically. I would suggest people. I would also suggest don't have the hurry of saying I need to get out there first or else someone else will do it. Don't have it overpass the need for proper team building, basically. Don't rush that. That's a mistake I think I made. Validate the commercial opportunity of each feature before you build it in any way you can, and be strict to yourself.
So yeah, it's we can safely conclude that external testing and validation is very important. Then the last pitfall before we get to the video of the 3 biggest pitfalls of Chip and Dearly. This one is related to the previous one of not listening to outsiders. And if you're listening to outsiders, avoid an echo chamber. You want honest feedback. If you can choose between criticism and praise, choose criticism. Because that is how you can improve. You will know your strong points, but improving on your weak points is much more important. So even when you get cursed at by users, or by users you might not even want, try to learn from what they're saying. So if you are testing or validating, look for honest feedback. Don't look for acknowledgement of how great your product is. Look on ways to improve. That's key. Daniel will tell us a bit more about testing. So let's have a look on that video.
Like we got the first funding in July, we got the team in August, September, and already mid-September we had our first prototype in the hands of actual visitors. In a small bar, it was nothing much. It was really stick together with tape and tie wraps technically, but it tested the assumption, do people like to be served in a different way while they're going out?
Yeah.
And this turned out great, and from that test we tested every month and everything broke, but what didn't break.
Yeah, so those were the pitfalls. This is an overview. You will get the slides if you signed up via email. You will get the slides. I would highly recommend just every quarter or so, take out this sheet and take an hour, ask yourself, how are we doing on this point? Have we fallen into this trap, this pitfall? So before we get to the 3 biggest pitfalls of Daniel and Pieter, let's summarize a bit. So we have discussed the 3 big parts of success, the Trinity, so to say. And we have discussed the pitfalls related to these 3 parts. Like I mentioned, the slides and the recording of this webinar will be sent to you afterwards by email. The interviews will be available as well, the full interviews. All attendees can contact Bytecode for free consultation with no strings attached. That's just, honestly, we love helping startups. We love getting in touch. So feel free, if you think there's anything we could advise on or whatever, feel free to do so. We'd love to help you. So then let's get to the last video of Pieter and Daniel on their core 3 pitfalls, and see what they noticed.
3 biggest pitfalls for startups. What would they be, in your opinion?
Well, the pivoting and the testing, really make sure that what you're building, that there's a need for it and that you continuously keep on doing that. Focus. Focus is very important. Now, constantly, like, I'm telling myself, okay, there's new ideas popping up every day. So it's like, okay, which one should I go for now? But then there's this voice in the back of my head, no, Pieter, focus. So it's really, for me, it's the biggest, danger is that there are so many things to do that your attention is floating on all direction. Well, the first thing you need to do is really focus on what will make your company sustainable.
So your product or...
Your product, your service, or your product. You need to make your business case very sustainable. And the third one is really, it's about focusing on your customers, your sales, and your revenue and your profits. So that will be my 3 answers. Yeah, being an entrepreneur isn't always easy, and it's easy to give up.
Yeah.
But my biggest advice will be, don't be too hard on yourself, and perseverance is key. So don't give up too soon, because if you see it through, it will work out. Yeah, if you have the right motivation for it.
Create a data model that is acceptable for change over time, right? If you build feature on top of feature, and well, it's generally called technical debt, I believe. I'm not a product owner, but I think this is the term for it. Both from the start, create an elaborate data model, as well as taking the time to like correct mistakes along the way. We should have done that a different way, because still to this date, there's like 1 out of 100 users experiences something that we cannot really explain, and this is to do with this data structure. Yeah. So now that we're hopefully finishing some funding soon, we're going to restructure the whole logic of the backend before growth again. So data model 1. Again, pitfall number 2, as a founder, you're so full of biases. Please break them. Have yourself hurt as much as you can by statistics and knowledge and other opinions. Get yourself blasted with negative comments in order to be happier later. Because if you then actually develop on it and the product becomes better, you'll be happier in the long run, except for doing your own mindset.
Yeah.
And the third one, yes, make sure that there's some experienced person helping you with creating a team.
Like a mentor.
It could be a mentor, could be an investor, could be like most of our investments from till now on came from government or subsidy origins. So we didn't have the old guy who was waving his finger saying you should do this or that. So hopefully with the next round we'll have more of that. No, but someone who've been building a tech team before, helping you build it and creating the right culture from the get-go. I think that's something I miss, and I would wish on other founders to find or look for.
So very great stuff too. Very interesting to hear what they think are the 3 biggest pitfalls. So it's for Pieter, it was pivoting and testing and focusing on the business case and focusing on the customers, the sales, the revenue, and the profit. I mean, all of them are very important. And from Daniel as well, create a data model that's open to change. So avoid that sort of technical debt. Break your own biases and use an experienced outsider to help create your team. All very, very important points. So I hope that you can relate to these ideas and learn from it. So let's get to the Q&A section here. We will answer the questions that have popped up in the chat during today's talk, and feel free to submit any extra questions. Sam, he added he sent in a question before the stream started. Are there examples that one combines sharing of open source software modules of the software product from a corporate social responsibility perspective and safeguard its competitive advantage? So that's a great question. I think if we can rephrase it, how can I combine having my software open source but wanting to safeguard my competitive advantage? So sharing versus not wanting competitors to be able to use it. There are a few ways. I'm, by the way, not completely sure on the corporate social responsibility perspective. It sounds a lot of corporate talk, and I'm not too experienced with corporates. But if you look at Red Hat, for example, that's they have Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Developers might have heard from it. It's completely free software, not free as in beer. It's free as in freedom. You will pay for it. You pay a license fee, but then you can do whatever the hell you want with it. So they have been acquired, I believe, 3 years ago or so for a lot of $1 billion. So there are many great examples. GitLab is a great example as well. They have their open source, you can do whatever the hell you want with it, piece of code. That's the community edition. And then they have the enterprise edition, which is built on top of the community edition. But those are the proprietary pieces. So that's how they keep their competitive edge. There's also a way of, I believe it's called the business source license. I might be butchering the name, but that's a great way as well, because then you make it open source and you can say you can look at it, you can use it, but you can set limitations on it. So you can, and then it's limitations based on the time. So you can say it's completely open source, but you can only use it for commercial uses after a year of the commit. So that's a great way to do it as well. And there's always the model of it's completely open source, but if you want, we can take care of the headache. So we can host it for you, we can manage it for you. That's an amazing idea as well. And as the creator of the software, even if people clone it, if you are the creator, you always have a competitive edge because you know the software better than everyone. So unless your prices are unreasonably high, like, $100, $200 per user per month, if your prices are reasonable, people will always pick you because you know it best. They want it from the people who know it best. So you always have that competitive edge. Laura asked, what would be a good approach to recruitment in the early stage of your startup? Should you hire one developer, maybe freelance, hire an agency or anything else? Very good question. If you have venture capital, like a decent amount of venture capital, and you have someone in your team who is experienced with building teams, then you could hire developers yourself. But in earlier phases, I would recommend working with people with a proven track record, making sure that you are flexible. You don't want to make any commitments on salaries. Like if you get someone on the payroll, you need to pay them every month. It's not like, well, this month there's not a lot of money, so we won't pay you. That's a bit harder. That's only possible if you work with freelancers or if you work with teams. And then I would really recommend getting a team already. There are companies out there, Bytecode is one of them, where you have sort of a team as a service. So people who are really experienced in building startups, an existing team that will help you out in the early phases, and then who will try to help you stand on your own legs as soon as possible. When it makes sense, they will help you stand on your own legs. So I would recommend taking that route. If you have venture capital, if you have enough money, having your own team is probably best if you have an experienced tech lead or CTO. Otherwise, I would recommend getting an agency or a very experienced freelancer who knows his way around the whole stack from front end to apps to back end, whatever. I think those were the questions. Let me know if I missed any. Thanks everyone for attending, and special thanks to Airship and Daily for the interviews. They agreed to be a part of Novelty, Utrecht Inc., Ace and Yes Delft for sending in their videos. And like I mentioned before, these are the contact details for me, for Nick. Feel free to reach out for anything. Again, no strings attached. We'd love to hear from you and give you advice on your situation. And so thanks everyone for being here today, and hope to hear from you.